Alright, hello guys. A little warning before we begin. What we are about to build is an electromagnetic pulse. This is going to be a small pocket device, but even though it is small, it will still be capable of destroying your phone, your PC, your screen, your TV, anything, any piece of electronic you possess. So this is for educational purposes only. We do encourage you to try and build it if you would like to, but be careful. This could do a lot of damage, and in many jurisdictions it may be illegal to create or operate one of these devices, so to your own risks. Alright, so our EMP device works in three parts. First of all, we have the battery, which is going to give us our electricity. And then that electricity is going to pass through the high voltage generator, which is going to be responsible for amplifying said electricity. So this is going to be maybe like 2 volts, and it's going to turn into something like 40,000 volts. And then when we're going to push the button, it's going to go through the spark gap. Now the spark gap is going to be responsible for storing that energy until it hits a certain point. And then, when it reaches that point, it's gonna release it, and it's gonna go through the coil. Now, the coil is gonna be responsible for turning this electricity into electromagnetic waves, which are gonna be the waves that are gonna hit your devices. Alright, and the last part is the USB-C charger. Now, this is simple. This is just to charge the battery once it's emptied out. I forgot to mention it, but we are working with high voltage, so be careful. This is another warning, be careful. Alright, so here are the tools you are going to need, other than the basic components for the EMP device. First of all, you are going to need a free hands, so pliers to hold the components. You are going to need a hot glue gun to glue the components together. You're going to need a multimeter for the voltage. You're going to need a welding machine and tin to weld the components together. And you're going to need a magnifying lens because some of the components are pretty small and you won't be able to see them. Next, the environment. Ideally, you should be in a lab with good lighting and ventilation because we are going to be welding. And ideally, you don't want to be inhaling all the fumes from your welding. Next, the skills you ideally, again, will need to build this device. Welding skills, because we are going to weld. And steady hands, because as I said previously, the components we are going to be using are pretty small. So unsteady hands will hinder your success. But that is optional since Julien is pretty shaky. And so now that we have seen how the device works, what tools we need, what skills we need, and the warnings, I think we're ready to work.
For this tutorial, we will need a high voltage generator module, a battery, a plastic box, a push button switch, a battery charger module, preferably like Type-C, a 1mm insulated copper wire, a water bottle cap, and 2 nails. Before building a circuit, you will need to construct a spark gap using 2 nails and a water bottle cap. To do this, push both nails to the opposite side of the cap so that their tips face each other with a small gap between them. This spark gap is a critical component of the EMP device as it is responsible for generating electromagnetic pulse. Take your time with these steps and make sure that the gap between the 2 nails is consistent and centered, as an uneven gap can affect the performance of the device. To wire the main circuit, start by connecting one of the output wires of the high voltage generator to one of the nails on the spark gap and solder the connection securely. Let the other wire free. Once the spark gap is wired, take your push button switch and solder one of its wires to the positive terminal of the battery. Connect the other wire of the switch to the red wire, which is the positive wire of the high voltage generator module. Finally, connect the black wire, which is the negative wire of the high voltage generator, to the negative terminal of the battery. The setups allows you to safety control the device as the push button switch act as a power gate. When pressed, it completes the circuit and activates the high voltage generator, and when it's released, it immediately cuts down the power. So we got a little problem while soldering the battery, so we tried a different way, but it's not mandatory to do this way. The next step is to connect the battery charger module with the battery. This part can be quite tricky, as the connectors are very small and require a steady hand and a good level of precision to avoid any mistakes. For this step, it is highly recommended to use a magnifying lens while soldering, as it will make much easier to see the small connection points clearly and allows you to work with the accuracy needed. Take one wire and connect it to the positive output of the charger module, then take the second wire and connect it to the negative output. Once both wires are in place, carefully solder each one to the corresponding pole of the battery, making sure that the positive wire goes to the positive poles and the negative one goes to the negative one. It's very important to double check the polarity before soldering, as reversing the connection could damage the battery, the charger module, or both, so take your time, do not rush at the steps. It's very important for the EMP to work. The next step is to wind the coil, which will serve as the antenna that broadcasts the electromagnetic pulse. To do this, take your copper wire and wrap it tightly around a medium-sized glass for about 10 turns. Try to keep the turns as close together and as even as possible, as a neat and uniform coil will improve the effectiveness and range of the pulse. When you are satisfied with the shape, carefully slide the coil off the glass and secure it a few stripes of electrical tape to hold its form and prevent it from unwinding or shifting out of shape during use. Now that both the main circuit and the charging circuit are complete, you will need to fit everything inside the box. Before gluing anything into place, I recommend you to test full circuit first to make sure everything works as expected. This will save you a lot of frustration later, as fixing a problem is much more easier before everything is sealed inside the box. Once you have confirmed the circuit is working correctly, plan the layout carefully and mark the spot on the box where you'll need to cut or drill holes. You will need one hole for the spark gap, one for the free wire, one for the push button, and one for the USB charging part so you can recharge your battery without opening the box. Once all the holes are prepared, carefully place the component inside the box and secure them with hot glue. Now that the core is ready, take the two ends of the copper wire and solder them to the output of your circuit. Make sure both connections are solid, clean, and well insulated to avoid any short circuit. Once everything is connected and tested one final time, position the coil on the outside of the enclosure box and glue it firmly in place, making sure it is centered and will not move or detach during use. At this point, your EMP device is fully assembled and ready to use. Press the push button to activate it, and the high voltage generator will charge the spark gap until it fires, then sending a pulse of electromagnetic energy to the coil.
Alright, so there you have it, guys. We have successfully built a device that is capable of generating electromagnetic pulses. Unfortunately, during our presentation we could not afford to break any piece of electronics due to a lack of funding, but we did get some static on the radio, as you can see in the video, which was pretty cool and demonstrates that this device does indeed work.